Hey, is this a JRPG channel now? Nah, it's actually a remake channel now. I mean, not even joking. How many fucking remakes and remasters can you pack into a single year before I realized that no new ideas seem to have been made outside of indie games for years and maybe it's time to just end it all. But anyway, on a more positive note, there is a joke out there that goes sort of like this. If you went back in time and you told me X would Y in the future, I would punch you for lying. In this age of crazy crossovers and unbelievable remakes, it makes perfect sense for such a joke to be able to keep extending its shelf life indefinitely, as things just seem to be getting crazier and crazier. Trials of Mana, on the other hand, is a remake that is equally crazy for the opposite reasons. If you were to travel back to the late 80s, early 90s Japan and shown a teenager this game and you said to him that this is the future of gaming, he would probably say something along the lines of, yeah, I can see that. This game literally feels like something plucked straight out of the 90s in terms of story, aesthetic and gameplay. And while some people may say that it is faithful to the point that such faithfulness detracts from the experience, I'd argue the opposite. This game is a special little thing, and it is so special because it is so faithful. And the only way to argue otherwise is to think that every single change that happened in the last decades was purely towards making games objectively better somehow, rather than a more nuanced change in taste and the desires of the market over a large period of time. AKA being a dummy. But you're not a dummy, are you? No, you're a smart person, and you do know that there have been changes in the last years for the better across the board. And that is true of this remake as well, because all of the quality of life changes that you'd expect from a remake are here. And in the specific case of the Trials of Mana remake, magic is integrated naturally into the game and it no longer pauses it, which prevents a host of bullshit from happening. In the original game, when you leveled up, you had to assign your new stat points right then and there, but in this new version, you can do it whenever you want from the menu, which of course also got completely revamped alongside the in-game UI for the maximum user experience points thing. It's good, okay? Not to mention, yes, praise Squeenix for pandering to my casual ass. They added in a quest marker. There's also some changes that are less of a way to fix problems, so much as a completely new thing, like the addition of the third dimension into combat with the use of flying enemies, that wasn't possible before in the top-down view, and also the ability to jump around to both counter the new flying enemies as well as a new way to explore the map. And even though they are more of a lateral change, let us call it that, I doubt anyone has any objections to the game making full use of its brand new dimension. So yes, I can confirm it is a faithful remake, about as faithful as it could possibly be with the new added dimension. But is it a good game? Well, to answer that question, I suppose we could start talking about the story. Which, yeah, I screwed myself over with that start, okay? The story of Trials of Mana is, to put it simply, not important. It is simply not important. That's not to say that it is a bad story, no. It does its job, and the dialogue makes the characters you play as pretty likable, and it showcases their simple but surprisingly effective personalities, and the villains are just absolute pieces of shit, like holy fucking shit. They're terrible. They're absolutely fucking terrible, but in a good way. Since it makes wanting to punch them in the face an objective you likely won't forget for the entirety of the journey. You just really want to punch them. But it is also, the story is also strangely vague and malleable, because the story is decided by the characters you pick. You see, before you begin the game, you must select 3 characters from a possible total of 6 characters in order to form the party that you use for the entire game. Each character has their own main antagonist, but there are only 3 antagonists, so out of the possible 6 party members, two of them share the same antagonist, and picking both of them for your party will give you a better shared story than if you had just randomly picked 3 characters. But the third character that you choose will inevitably have nothing to do with the other ones, and their story will basically be an ever-growing number of dangling plot threads until the late game, when their antagonist will just show up and give a random excuse to fuck off from the plot forever in an incredibly awkward way. And it's honestly hilarious, but it also kind of highlights a bit of a problem with the game's story, which also defies summarization due to the fact that each character has their own complete playable backstory prologue before they meet, and this constant mix and match of character moments randomly appearing and disappearing throughout the same unmovable story beats makes for a pretty different experience, but unfortunately it is a pretty unsubstantial main storyline. At the end of the day though, I think we probably just shouldn't take this game too seriously. This is a cute game in a cute world where shooting yourself out of a cannon is a perfectly acceptable means of transportation, and where one of the most powerful gods around is just this cute wiggly little plant thing. And I mean, just look at how cute she is. I want one for myself. I put her in a plant pot next to my desk, and whenever I'm feeling down, I'll just look at her wiggling and I'll instantly feel better. And wait, what were we talking about again? Yes, video games. And you can't video game without gameplay, so let's talk about that. The melee combat follows a pretty standard scheme. There is a light attack button and a heavy attack button. The heavy attack changes depending on how many times you press the light attack button before it, forming a very simple combo system that you probably already have encountered before if you play 3D brawlers like the Yakuza series. It's a pretty standard kind of cliche at this point. It is not entirely without depth, since some heavy attacks will be area attacks, some will pierce in a line. You can do attacks by jumping, you can do aerial attacks, but it's still kind of shallow without the addition of the fact that you can also use class skills and magic skills, and they both operate by spending resources from their own individual bars to activate. Each character has their own specific class skill, depending on their current class, but the magic skills must be acquired by spending training points on specific stats that will eventually unlock the skills. The class skills are activated like you might have guessed by simply using simple button presses during combat while controlling the character you want to use the skill with. But magic skills and items can be used either through shortcuts or by using the ring menu, which automatically pauses the game when activated and allows you to order any characters to use any item in your inventory or any skills they might have, thus allowing you to have kind of a higher degree of control over them, other than just letting them run free on the battlefield with only the basic instructions the game allows you to set. Not that it helps much, since the partner AI in this game has the intelligence level of lemmings and will gladly screw everything up and die without a care in the world. This is especially aggravating on boss battles, since a lot of them share the same gimmick of having the boss use a powerful attack unless you can hit them hard enough during the small time frame it takes for them to charge up, but the game expects all of the characters to hit them hard during these moments, and yet the AI will just take too long to figure out what to do, or perhaps even more aggravatingly, they will use their weakest attacks during this most important moment. Not to mention when some bosses decide to just go full fuck it mode and spam a series of attacks that covers the entire boss arena, which you just know the AI isn't capable of dodging. So unless you plan to solo all of the bosses, which I didn't since I built a balanced support party, prepare to babysit the AI so they can properly execute their jobs. Thankfully, they can hold their own and even be helpful when fighting against normal enemy groups, thanks to the enemies dishing out lower damage numbers than the bosses. So, for most of the time you only have to worry about telling your healer to use their spells once in a while and everything's fine, allowing you to fully enjoy the fast-paced combat, going from battle to battle rather quickly. Battles themselves are rather short and sweet affairs, where you can get extra experience by doing well, but they're also over before you know it, and you're on to the next one, where you can try your hand to do better again should you be unsatisfied with your previous performance. Though once again, even if you do well, in fact, they will end in a flash even faster. This is a game that leaves you little time to ponder on your mistakes and your victories before allowing you to try again using whatever tools and skills you got at hand. Which makes it strangely addictive in that way, where you just keep going from battle to battle, from place to place, and before you know it, blasting enemy after enemy, and before you know it, it's 4 AM and you have to work tomorrow. But forget about that for now. Let us rewind a little bit to something you might have noticed I mentioned before but didn't elaborate upon, which is arguably where the real meat of the game is. Let's talk about the class system and stat distribution. Each character begins with their own class. After a certain point in the game, you can choose to upgrade them to a light class or a dark class. And once again, even later, you can upgrade their upgraded classes into even upgradier versions that are also divided into light and dark. So you can end up with a light, dark, light, or dark class. Now, try saying all of that 5 times really fast. I doubt you do it. Well, in the original, that's where your path ended, but in this remake, you can also upgrade them once more to an ultimate light class or an ultimate dark class. That's a lot of upgrading, and each class comes with their own class skills and set of other skills that must be unlocked through the use of training points. This is where things get even more interesting, because you see, when you level up, you get these training points that can be spent on different stats on the menu screen. A lot of the time they don't have any immediate benefit, but once you pass a certain threshold, they can either passively upgrade your character's actual stats, like for example, investing on strength will eventually boost your main attack power, but they can also unlock passive abilities that can be equipped to your character. Though those passive abilities can also be learned by talking with specific characters at certain points in the game as well. And they can also allow you to unlock magic skills that vary from the classic magic bolts to healing spells, and even being able to cast an element on another character's weapon to allow them to hit enemies' elemental weaknesses with their normal attacks. The skills and buffs you unlock depends on the character classes that you choose, which means you essentially weld together these different skill trees as you go along, which makes for a surprisingly deep character growth system, which is without a doubt probably the main reason the original game even got famous in the first place. And the weirdest thing, and the best thing as well, is that there is no bad stat. And if you build a balanced party like I so often did, you will find out that you will be placing different stats on different characters, like you'd expect from, like, I don't know, a classical dungeon crawler, specializing your different characters into different areas. You do this here as well, surprisingly enough. And, like, for example, let's talk about the luck stat. You'd imagine the luck stat is so often, in many games, complete garbage, or there is some other abstract weird stat that doesn't work for most of the time. But then this one, not only is it a really useful stat, but you can also unlock all sorts of things. There are characters in this game that you can unlock traps and weird active damaging skills by investing on their luck tree. There really is no bad stat. It all depends on how you build your party, which is why I think I love this game so much, because you would be placing points into trees thinking, oh, maybe this stat is really bad. Then you unlock a class and find out that no, if you invest on that stat, you can actually do some really crazy good stuff. The downside of all of that good class stuff is, of course, that even though you can respec your characters, you likely won't during your entire playthrough, because you can only change classes at specific points in the game, and the second class change requires an item that can only be acquired through purely random means, which ends up discouraging experimentation, which means in the end that the true depth of Trials of Mana can only be truly experienced by multiple playthroughs. A single playthrough, make no mistake, a single playthrough is already a joy to play, but it will only show you a little glimpse of the game's true potential. But what will be on full display the entire time, regardless of how much time you choose to spend with the game, however, is the art style. Everything from the character design to the world design is incredibly 80s. It's like a playable 80s fantasy anime. It reminds me greatly of the recently released Dragon Quest XI, or the entire Dragon Quest series, to be honest, though obviously the character designs themselves are vastly different, since Drake characters have the big advantage of being designed by one of the most uniquely iconic mangakas of all time, Akira Toriyama himself. But I do think Hakan is a supremely talented artist that clearly brought their A game in trying to update the designs for the remake. And not only do they look great, I'd like to personally shake the hands, well, not right now, because of reasons, but eventually when the world is better again, I would like to personally shake the hands of the entire 3D modeling team for translating the art so well into 3D. And hell, the entire art team themselves deserves praises from all directions, all of the art people, because everything from the main characters to the NPCs and even the random enemies look so wonderful. And all of the designs look so, let us nail it down to, unapologetic on being exactly what they wanted them to be. Ain't no edX department holding these guys down. Where the game falters a little bit is on the world design. The level design and the art style by themselves are fantastic, and they are as varied as they can possibly be considering the battle system they have to accommodate. But the world can definitely feel weirdly empty and repetitive at times, because it turns out that the tile set mindset that worked so well in making the original games of that era look so beautiful, they kind of lost something in their translation to 3D. And make no mistake, this texture repetition and hanger-like emptiness is something I feel a lot of JRPGs, most of them not even remakes, struggle with to this day. That's just a little nitpicking detail. It's not something that actually made me actively dislike the game, design, or anything. But, well, finally, I feel like I have to acknowledge the controversy and the slight weird rivalry that this game has created with the Final Fantasy VII Remake, only in certain communities. I think most communities were just really happy to see both games remade, but on a few places, there was this sort of weird fight going between them. And I want to address that, not because I think it's important or really that relevant in any way, but because I want to. Because of just how weird it is that the Final Fantasy VII Remake saw fit to change so much, perhaps too much, depending on your opinion, of the original game, while the Trials of Mana remake remained as perfectly faithful as it could be. And both games were released by the same company only a couple of weeks apart. Yes, I know they were made by completely different teams, but they share so much of the same publisher and time frame similarities that I feel like comparisons are inevitable. Now, I don't want to wait on what game is the better game, because I think both games try to do completely different things and that they mostly succeeded in what they were individually attempting to do, but I would be lying if I said that according to my own personal and incredibly subjective opinion of what a remake should be, and allow me to repeat this before you dislike Bomb Me to Hell, this is just my opinion, but I would be lying if I said I didn't have more favorable opinions of one of these games as a remake over the other. And the scales, for better or worse, tip towards Trials of Mana. What I'm trying to say is, I honestly think that the Trials of Mana remake as a remake is a better remake of the original Trials of Mana than the Final Fantasy VII remake as a remake is to the original Final Fantasy VII. And I would also be lying if I said I didn't leave Trials of Mana with less controversial, contradicting opinions and more positive feelings. Obviously, it is probably easier to remake an action RPG as an action RPG rather than remaking an active turn-based JRPG as a real-time with pause but not really RPG thing that the Final Fantasy VII remake is. But honestly, while the Trials of Mana remake got way less of a budget, it honestly feels like the developers had a lot more freedom to do what they wanted, since the Mana series is relatively unknown in modern days, and the lack of importance also allowed them to just announce it under the radar and do their own little thing at their own pace, unlike the Final Fantasy VII remake, which is a gaming monolith, and it had to be announced in a big conference when it was convenient for their publishers to hack in the big numbers to announce them with the announcement, and then they just left Nomura to deal with it during development hack with the constant pressure of when and how the remake would be released. So yeah, maybe this comparison isn't fair at all, since the Final Fantasy VII remake devs kind of drew the short end of the remake stick, and they still ended up with an amazing product in the end anyway. But meanwhile, while they were delivering their big explosive product, Trials of Mana just came and delivered a heartwarming adventure and then just went along its way. No multiple parts, no hardcore changes, no drama. Just a little game with a big heart, which is why I can definitely recommend it to pretty much anyone who likes video games. It's a good game, it's a good experience. I don't think you will leave with any negative feelings or dissatisfaction. And if you want to feel and truly understand what gaming was like in the 90s, then you should probably just grab an emulator or maybe a Switch and a Nintendo account to get the games, the game library, the old game library. But assuming all of human history prior to the 2000s somehow gets erased by a crazy AI someday, then well, this is definitely the next best thing. Thanks for watching to the very end. This was a review. This is the part where you like, comment, and go do something better with your life than sitting down watching YouTube videos all day during quarantine. Please do something better.